Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The sorting ceremony is a moment that forever changes the life of every Hogwarts first year. One word from the sorting hat and suddenly you're not just a student of a magical school, but part of a grand tradition, a rich history, a living community. Today, I'll tell you about those who could easily have ended up in a different house, and who might have become entirely different people because of it. Enjoy watching? Number 1. Gilderoy Lockhart. Let's begin with perhaps the most surprising example. Gilderoy Lockhart, a man whose looks eclipsed his intellect and whose charm masked a complete lack of real magical skill. Infatuated with himself, he lied, stole the glory of others, and gleefully sculpted a heroic image out of thin air. And yet, Lockhart was sorted into Ravenclaw. A strange choice, perhaps. But even among Ravenclaws there's room for the ambitious, the cunning, and the sly, those who use their intellect not for truth, but for appearance. There are rumours the Hat seriously considered placing him in Slytherin. His hunger for fame and his willingness to do anything to get it would have fit in perfectly there. So why Ravenclaw? Maybe there was real cleverness behind that gleaming smile, just not the kind Luna Lovegood would have admired. Number 2, Minerva McGonagall, one of the most respected professors at Hogwarts, stern yet fair. Minerva McGonagall once stood beneath the sorting hat herself, and surprisingly, the hat didn't rush to make its decision. For 5.5 full minutes, it wavered between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Minerva possessed a sharp mind, an eagerness to learn, and exceptional magical talent, all qualities that would have made her a Ravenclaw's pride. But, in the end, other traits won out: her strength of will, firm principles, and natural leadership. She became a Gryffindor, and later one of its most distinguished heads of house. Number 3, Filius Flitwick. In his youth, Filius Flitwick also found himself at a crossroads. The Hat debated whether he belonged in Ravenclaw or Gryffindor. A charms master, an outstanding wizard, and, importantly, a man of courage, Flitwick fought against Voldemort both before and after his return. Ultimately, the Hat chose Ravenclaw, and as McGonagall herself once joked, this decision sparked a long tradition of friendly banter between two future heads of house. Number 4, Hermione Granger. Hermione is the embodiment of intelligence, diligence, and curiosity. It would seem her place was in Ravenclaw, the house that values knowledge, wit, and wisdom above all. And indeed, the Hat gave serious thought to placing her there. But at the last moment, it changed its mind. Friendship and bravery are more important than books and cleverness, Hermione would later say, in the Philosopher's Stone. These words proved that Gryffindor was not just an accident, it was a deeper personal choice. Number 5, Harry Potter. One of the most iconic moments in the entire series is Harry Potter's sorting. He clearly fit Gryffindor, brave, loyal, willing to risk everything for others. Yet the Hat hesitated especially long in his case. "You could be great in Slytherin," it whispered to him. And it was true. Ambition, leadership, even a desire to stand out could have led Harry down another path. Many believe the presence of Voldemort's soul influenced the Hat's thinking. But perhaps the truth runs deeper. Harry stood on the edge, and he made the choice himself. He chose loyalty over power. Number 6, Neville Longbottom. When the unsure, forgetful Neville sat under the Hat, many expected it to send him to Hufflepuff, the house of loyalty, patience, and hard work. And the Hat truly did consider it, but then it made an unexpected choice: Gryffindor. And years later, Neville proved himself more than worthy. He became a hero, led Dumbledore's army, fought Death Eaters, destroyed a Horcrux, and pulled the sword of Gryffindor from the Hat. His story is one of personal triumph, the tale of a quiet boy who became a lion. Number 7, Severus Snape. Severus Snape read books the way others breathed. In The Half-Blood Prince, His notes in the margins, elegant, exact, turned a school textbook into a masterpiece. Sectum sempra for enemies. Not just a spell, but a creation. He didn't just learn magic, he reshaped it. That kind of mind belonged in Ravenclaw, where the pursuit of knowledge was the highest virtue. He could have studied beside professors, not Death Eaters. He might have found respect instead of ridicule. But Snape didn't grow up in a house filled with books and quiet. He came from neglect, from silence, from corners of dusty walls and slammed doors. Lily Evans was his light, and she was brave, Gryffindor brave. To follow her, he needed power. To escape humiliation, he needed armor. Slytherin gave him both. "You should be careful," Lily warned him when he started speaking like the others. But it was already too late. He needed a home, and Slytherin offered one. Still, the Sorting Hat must have paused. Snape had the cold intellect of a Ravenclaw, the discipline, the drive. Maybe it saw how different things could be. Maybe it saw a boy who would spend his life in shadow when he might have lived in light. In another house, among other minds, perhaps Severus Snape would never have needed to be brave. He would only have needed to be himself. Number 8. Percy Weasley. Percy Weasley wanted to matter, not just as another Weasley, but as Percy, respected, important, seen. In the Order of the Phoenix, he chose the ministry over his own family. "You're being blinded by the love of your office," Arthur told him. Percy didn't flinch. He believed in order, in structure, in doing things the right way. That belief led him down a dangerous path. Not evil, but cold, calculated, the kind of ambition Slytherin values. The Sorting Hat must have felt the pull. Percy's desire to climb, to be recognized, to prove himself. A Slytherin among Gryffindors, he often stood apart. And yet, in the Deathly Hallows, he came back. He fought beside Fred in the Battle of Hogwarts. "I'm sorry," he whispered before it was too late. That was Percy's true courage, not in defying danger, but in facing his own pride. Had he been sorted into Slytherin, maybe he would have thrived, or maybe he would have lost himself completely. Number 9. Remus Lupin. Remus Lupin never let his curse define him. He woke each day knowing danger lived inside him, but he still chose to teach, to fight, to love. In The Half-Blood Prince, Tonks says, "You see, she still wants to marry him even though he's a werewolf." And Remus, torn between fear and duty, nearly walks away. Not because he's weak, but because he cares too deeply. That quiet selflessness is the heart of Hufflepuff. He belonged there just as much as anywhere. No one worked harder to control himself. No one sacrificed more quietly. Remus never asked for recognition. In school, he spent every full moon locked away, bloodied and broken, but came back smiling. He studied in silence while his friends played. He kept their secrets, even when it meant shouldering guilt alone. The Sorting Hat must have seen that deep well of patience, that honest goodness, and considered Hufflepuff and hard. But in the end it placed him in Gryffindor, maybe because deep down it recognized the cost he was willing to pay to do what's right, to join the Order, to return to Hogwarts and teach defense against the dark arts, to face Fenrir Greyback, the very monster who made him. Remus didn't wear his bravery like armor, he carried it like a burden, and he never set it down. Number 10, Sirius Black. Sirius Black broke 100 years of tradition with a single choice. Gryffindor, the Sorting Hat declared, and the entire Black family felt the sting. Born into a house of pure blood pride and Slytherin heritage, Sirius was expected to follow the path of his parents, cousins, and ancestors. "My mother was furious," he later told Harry. "She blasted me off the family tree." But Sirius didn't just rebel. He rejected everything they stood for. He chose courage over cunning, loyalty over blood. And yet, the Slytherin in him never disappeared. He was proud, reckless, and sharp-tongued. He hated Snape with the kind of burning contempt that Slytherins reserve for traitors. In the Order of the Phoenix, he goaded Kreacher with deliberate cruelty and risked exposure just to feel useful. "You're not a bad person," Hermione told him once, "but you are a bit, well, reckless." These weren't the flaws of a Gryffindor, they were shadows of the house he might have belonged to. If the hat had sent him to Slytherin, Sirius might have become something else entirely. Not a Death Eater, perhaps, but a different kind of rebel. One who used ambition as his weapon and secrecy as his shield. He still might have turned against his family, but from the inside. A snake among snakes, fighting the poison from within. But the hat must have sensed what Sirius feared most, becoming like them. So it placed him where he could be free, even if that freedom came with a price. Number 11. Luna Lovegood. Luna Lovegood saw the world through a lens no one else understood. Rackspurts, nargles, and dirigible plums filled her thoughts, but that wasn't what made her strange, it was what made her brave. She didn't hide who she was. In the Order of the Phoenix, when no one else believed Harry about Voldemort, Luna didn't just believe him. She joined the DA, cast spells with quiet strength, and followed him into the Department of Mysteries without flinching. She watched her friends fall in that battle. She duelled Death Eaters. She stood by Neville and Ginny when Hogwarts turned dark, forming the resistance from within. "We fly, of course," she said calmly to Harry when others hesitated. That wasn't just Ravenclaw wisdom, that was courage. Pure, burning courage, the kind that didn't roar but endured. Luna didn't need to shout to be brave. She just was. Gryffindor could have been her home. The Sorting Hat must have seen the fire beneath her quiet demeanour. In the Deathly Hallows, when the trio visited her house, her painted ceiling said everything. Friends. Their names circled over and over like a prayer. Luna fought not because she sought glory, but because she believed in what was right. She believed in love, in truth, in people. And yet Ravenclaw claimed her, maybe because her mind soared where others couldn't follow, or maybe because the hat knew she didn't need to prove her bravery. She would carry it with her wherever she went. Luna Lovegood, whether in blue or red, would always walk into the fire, barefoot, dream-eyed, and unafraid. Number 12. Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley didn't shine the way Harry or Hermione did. He wasn't the boy who lived. He didn't ace every class, but he stood tall when it mattered. When Harry needed someone to face a giant chessboard in the Philosopher's Stone, Ron stepped forward without hesitation. "That's chess," he said, climbing onto the horse. "You've got to make some sacrifices." He wasn't looking for glory. He was doing what a true friend would do, risking himself so. The others could go on. That moment wasn't about bravery alone. It was about loyalty, about selflessness, traits Helga Hufflepuff valued above all. Ron was never afraid of hard work. He grew up with hand-me-downs, made jokes to keep others smiling, and always stuck by Harry, even when it hurt. In the Goblet of Fire, he felt jealous, betrayed, but he came back. He always came back. That kind of emotional resilience is what makes a Hufflepuff strong. Not the lack of fear, but the ability to forgive. The Sorting Hat might have seen all this. It may have looked past the red hair and Gryffindor legacy and glimpsed a heart built for loyalty, not fame. Difficult. Very difficult, it had murmured to Harry. It likely whispered something similar to Ron. A boy who would one day destroy a Horcrux with trembling hands, yet never leave his friends again. In Hufflepuff, Ron might have been a different kind of hero. One who worked in quiet, unnoticed ways and still changed everything. But Gryffindor called to him. Perhaps because that's where his brothers had gone, or perhaps because he needed to believe in himself the way they did. Yet if fate had turned ever so slightly, Ron might have worn yellow and black, and he still would have stood, tall and stubborn, in front of danger, not for glory, not for recognition, just for the people he loved. Number 13. Tom Riddle, Voldemort. The Sorting Hat hesitated. It rarely did, but when young Tom Riddle sat beneath it, the pause was noticeable. "You could be great, you know," the Hat whispered. "It's all here in your head." Tom was clever, brilliant even. He wasn't just another orphan. He was a child who devoured books, asked questions most adults couldn't answer, and already mastered magic far beyond his years. He had ambition, yes, but also an intense hunger for knowledge. It wasn't just about power, not yet. At Wool's orphanage he had no wand, no mentor, no books. Still he could move objects, control animals, even hurt others without lifting a finger. But when Dumbledore first met him, he wasn't impressed by cruelty. He was struck by the boy's sharpness. "I can make bad things happen to people who are mean to me," Tom had said. But he wasn't proud. He was curious, calculating. That curiosity might have found a better home in Ravenclaw than Slytherin, a place where intellect mattered more than blood. Imagine Tom Riddle under the guidance of Professor Flitwick. Imagine him buried in ancient texts in the restricted section, not for domination but for discovery. Imagine a boy who wanted to understand Horcruxes not to conquer death but to study its limits. In another world, he could have been the magical world's greatest scholar, a name known not for terror but for breakthroughs. He could have stood beside Dumbledore in the Department of Mysteries, not across from him in battle. But the Hat chose Slytherin. Perhaps it saw too much of Salazar in the boy, or perhaps Tom himself whispered his preference, as Harry once did. "Not Slytherin, eh?" the Hat had asked Harry. "You could be great." Tom never refused the greatness Slytherin promised. He reached for it with both hands, and the world paid the price. Number 14, Cho Chang, of all the students who passed through the ancient, enchanted halls of Hogwarts, Cho Chang remains a figure often misunderstood. Her name is remembered by most for the tears she shed, for the boy she kissed, and the one she mourned, but few paused to consider the quiet strength behind her grief. Labelled by the Sorting Hat as a Ravenclaw, Cho was known for her intelligence, her aptitude for charms, and her graceful presence on the Quidditch pitch. Yet if one peers beyond the surface, past the house banners and school records, a different truth begins to form. Cho Chang may have belonged in Hufflepuff, not because she lacked intellect, but because she was, above all else, guided by loyalty, empathy, and a heart that bore the weight of every sorrow it encountered. The Sorting Hat famously sings that Hufflepuff will take the rest, those students who don't fit neatly into the other three houses. But this perception is misleading. Helga Hufflepuff did not simply gather the leftover souls. She embraced those with unwavering work ethic, fierce loyalty, and a commitment to kindness. Cho, despite her placement, exhibited these traits repeatedly in ways that set her apart from the archetype of the logical Ravenclaw, her. Emotional vulnerability, often perceived as a weakness, was in truth the very quality that revealed her greatest strength, her deep, consistent connection to others. After Cedric Digory's death, the weight of loss settled onto Cho's shoulders like a shroud. The boy who had once soared alongside her, laughing in the crisp air above the Quidditch pitch, was gone. Her reaction to Cedric's death was visceral. She cried often, openly, and without apology. Some students avoided her. Even Harry, as he later admitted, found her grief uncomfortable. But this was not a mark of weakness. This was the pure expression of love and sorrow, a Hufflepuff's grief. It was loyal, aching, and profoundly human. In Order of the Phoenix, when Cho tries to talk to Harry about Cedric, her emotions overwhelm her. She started to cry quietly again, her face turned away from him. Her pain was not calculated or restrained, it was honest. She wore her heart on her sleeve, and in doing so, honoured Cedric in a way no cold logic ever could. Hufflepuff House values fairness above all. Cho was fair even when it cost her socially. When Marietta Edgecombe betrayed Dumbledore's army to Umbridge, Cho defended her. Most of the others were furious. Harry was livid. But Cho saw Marietta not as a traitor, but as a frightened girl who had made a terrible mistake. "She's a lovely person, really," Cho said, as quoted in the same book. Her instinct was to understand, not condemn, a deeply Hufflepuff trait. She refused to cut people off simply because it was easy or convenient. She believed in the worth of others, even when they failed. This pattern continued during her involvement in Dumbledore's army. She joined not because she wanted to show off her skills or gain prestige, but because she believed in the cause. Despite her grief and internal conflict, she took a stand. She was willing to defy Umbridge's rules and face real consequences. Hufflepuffs are often underestimated, but they are steadfast in their convictions. Cho's quiet courage in those meetings, her willingness to practice spells even as her heart broke, showed a resilience that didn't shout. It endured. Her relationship with Harry, though fraught with confusion and pain, revealed even more layers of her character. Cho did not approach him with the strategy of a Slytherin or the detached curiosity of a Ravenclaw. She approached him as a girl who had lost someone and needed someone else to understand. She was sincere in her affections, even when they were messy. In the famous kiss scene in the Room of Requirement, Cho weeps as she leans into Harry. She was crying, the book notes, but also kissing him at the same time. It was an honest moment, full of contradiction and vulnerability. She was not trying to impress, she was trying to connect. Yet many judged her for this. She was labeled as weepy, emotional, confused, but these labels ignore the reality that Cho was mourning and still chose to open her heart again. This courage, the willingness to love after loss, is a quiet miracle. It's the sort of inner strength that Hufflepuff celebrates, even when others overlook it. Unlike Ravenclaws, who are prized for their cleverness, Hufflepuffs are defined by the depth of their hearts. Cho's choices, her loyalty to friends, her emotional openness, all pointed not toward intellect, but compassion. In battle, Cho did not falter. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she returned to fight, to stand beside her peers, even after all the loss she had endured. And Cho Chang walked in, the book recounts, among the students who answered the call to defend their school. She had no obligation to come back. She was older, a former student, already scarred by tragedy, but she returned because loyalty pulled her back, to her school, to her friends, to the fight against evil. In that moment, she stood shoulder to shoulder with the very Hufflepuff whose death had shattered her world. Cedric's memory did not crush her, it inspired her. Cedric himself had been the quintessential Hufflepuff, brave, fair, humble, and kind. That Cho had loved him said as much about her nature as it did about his. Their connection was not based on ambition or prestige, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. They shared values, they shared moments of gentleness. And in mourning him, Cho carried forward the torch of his ideals. One could imagine Helga Hufflepuff herself watching this girl with soft eyes, recognizing in Cho the same quiet flame of dignity that once glowed in her own students. Number 15, Ginny Weasley. In her first year at Hogwarts, Ginny Weasley slipped into the shadows not because she lacked courage, but because she carried a secret too heavy for any child to bear. She wrote in a diary not knowing it was a piece of Lord Voldemort's fragmented soul. The trust she showed in that object and the caution she used to hide her feelings from even her family were not signs of weakness. They were signs of subtle cunning. Slytherins are known for ambition and secrecy, for their ability to manipulate situations to their advantage, and Ginny, unknowingly, played the perfect hand. She lived two lives that year, one as the shy little sister of Ron, and the other as the confessor to Tom Riddle. Her ability to maintain that duality, even under stress, paints the portrait of a girl who could have thrived in Slytherin colours. Her behaviour during the second book is often seen as victimhood, but there's more beneath the surface. Ginny didn't just open the Chamber of Secrets under Tom Riddle's influence. She resisted him. She knew something was wrong. "I think the diary's affecting her," Percy said, vaguely aware of her behaviour, but Ginny never told him. She chose silence. She endured her nightmares, her blackouts, the fear of having done something terrible, all alone. That self-imposed secrecy wasn't just fear, it was control. She knew how to hide, how to protect an image. That's not a Gryffindor's instinct, it's a Slytherin's survival strategy. Even in her earliest interactions, Ginny showed a grasp of emotional intelligence far beyond her years. When Harry visited the burrow, Ginny blushed and ran away. A child's crush, yes, but also a defense mechanism. Later, she learned to control those feelings. By the time she joined Dumbledore's army, she wasn't the blushing girl anymore. She was confident, composed, and sharply witty. She chose to date others, like Michael Corner and Dean Thomas, not out of whim, but with strategic clarity. She gave herself emotional space from Harry until he was ready to see her as an equal. That was not passivity, that was patience. As Rowling writes, she had never been just Ron's little sister, not to him. That self-assurance is not loud, it's calculating, it waits, it watches. It strikes at the right time. Her wit was as sharp as her hexes. In the room of requirement, when Zacharias Smith questioned Harry's authority, Ginny was the first to defend him, with a bat-bogey hex so powerful it became her signature spell. She did not defend Harry with words or emotion, but with action. When the DA needed a leader in the shadows, Ginny volunteered, not for fame or recognition, but because it was necessary. She was tactical, assessing risk, and always protecting others without calling attention to herself. Her leadership in the DA during Harry's absence is often attributed to Neville Longbottom, but Ginny was just as integral, and in some ways more dangerous to the Carrows. She was unpredictable, elusive, and impossible to control. It's easy to forget that the Sorting Hat hesitated with Harry, offering him Slytherin because of his ambition, his resourcefulness, his drive. Ginny, like Harry, had those same traits, but unlike Harry, she never had a sorting debate. She simply accepted Gryffindor. Yet the qualities she developed later, subtle manipulation, independence, cunning, were not traits she picked up from her house. They bloomed from within, nurtured not by her environment, but by her experience. When she joined the Quidditch team, it wasn't with fanfare. She did not beg for a chance. She watched, waited, and then stepped in when Harry was banned. She became a seeker, Harry's position, and then a chaser. She was versatile, willing to adapt her role for the good of the team. She didn't crave the spotlight. She earned it. Her drive to win, her fearless attitude in the air, and her competitive fire were balanced by precision and control, the marks of someone who knew the importance of timing. Her relationship with Harry is also telling. She never chased him. She never wept for him. She respected his decisions even when it hurt. When Harry broke up with her for her safety, Ginny didn't protest dramatically. She understood. And when the war came, she fought anyway. That kind of loyalty, tempered by an understanding of the larger picture, isn't just bravery, it's vision. It's the clarity to see beyond oneself and to keep moving forward even when love stands in the way. Ginny's bond with the twins also deserves attention. Fred and George, archetypes of mischief and boldness, found in Ginny their perfect third. She stole their joke products, helped test them, and never snitched. She matched their energy without ever getting caught. She was their silent partner, not their tag-along. And when they left Hogwarts in their grand escape, Ginny didn't weep. She smiled. She understood rebellion. She respected disruption. It wasn't just that she liked breaking rules. She knew which ones to break, and when. In the 6th book, when she hexed Romilda Vane for trying to spike Harry's drink, she did it without waiting for permission. Ginny's sense of justice was never loud like Hermione's or righteous like Harry's. It was personal, sharp-edged, and immediate. She didn't moralize, she acted. And in that way, she resembled a Slytherin more than a Gryffindor. Her world was not defined by ideals. It was defined by loyalty to people, not principles. Ginny was the only Weasley child with such a tight control over her emotions. Ron wore his heart on his sleeve. The twins exploded with energy. Percy was rigid, but Ginny? She balanced her public and private life with grace. Even after the trauma of the diary, she never played the victim. She buried it deep. She became stronger. She never once used it as an excuse. That strength, the silent, personal kind, is often misunderstood. But it is the foundation of cunning. It's the quality of someone who can survive betrayal and build power quietly. Number 16, Dolores Umbridge. At 11 years old, Dolores Jane Umbridge sat on the high stool beneath the sorting hat, stiff-backed, tightly wound, and trembling with a kind of silent anticipation. She was not what most first years might have seemed. There was no wide-eyed wonder in her gaze, no childlike awe. Her fingers clutched the edge of her robes as the hat slipped over her head, and within her surged an aching desire, not just to belong, but to be respected, to be seen. The sorting hat, ancient and wise, peered into her mind and found not cruelty but hunger. It saw her yearning for structure, a need to mold her surroundings into predictability. It found a girl who admired the silent strength of systems, of laws that did not waver. It found a child who watched the noble ministry from afar with reverence, dreaming not of greatness but of acceptance. Her father, Orford Umbridge, a lowly ministry janitor, was nothing. Her mother, a weak-willed, magic-hating muggle. She was ashamed of them both. The sorting hat weighed two paths before her, one guided by ambition, the other by diligence, and for a fleeting moment it hovered. Hufflepuff, it mused, where they are just and loyal, patient, hard-working. But Dolores did not want patience, not really. She wanted to rise above the shame that haunted her family name. The hat saw her desire to prove herself, her need to climb. She would not build with others, she would dominate them. And so after a long minute, it roared, "Slytherin!" Years later, she wore the green and silver with pride, yet she never quite fit among the pure-blood aristocracy that haunted Slytherin's common room like spectral judges. She was half-blood, her mother having fled with her brother into the Muggle world when Dolores was still young. Her bitterness festered. She clung to rules, to regulations, to the comfort of tradition. She mimicked the airs of those above her. She discovered the intoxicating effect of power, even in small doses, reporting students, correcting behavior, gaining favor with professors. But deep within, the seed of Hufflepuff never fully died. It remained buried, suffocated by bitterness, but present. The girl who once believed in fairness, who sought recognition for her hard work, was still there, though fading. It was Professor Binns who first remarked on her diligence. "Miss Umbridge," he had muttered, leafing through her scrolls, "a thorough job, quite methodical." It was the first praise she had received in years. She clung to it. From then on, history became her stronghold. She memorized not the tales of glory and sacrifice, but the decrees, the documents, the policy changes. Where others saw events, Dolores saw laws. She joined the ministry straight after Hogwarts, securing a lowly position in the improper use of magic office. It was dull, repetitive work, quills scratching parchment late into the night. But Dolores flourished. Her dedication bordered on obsessive. She filed every form, cross-referenced every statute, and watched her colleagues falter under the weight of tedium while she ascended. This was her gift, a Hufflepuff's work ethic, wielded with a Slytherin's hunger for power. Cornelius Fudge noticed her first. She agreed with him, always, smiled when he did. spoke only when needed, always with an air of unwavering loyalty. "Dolores," he once said with a half-laugh, "is the kind of civil servant the ministry needs, thorough, loyal." But that loyalty was never to a person, it was to power itself. During the rise of Voldemort's return, the ministry clung desperately to its own delusions. Fudge, threatened by Dumbledore's growing influence, sought a way to control the school. Umbridge was the answer. She was sent to Hogwarts as the High Inquisitor, cloaked in pink and authority. Her rules multiplied like spores. Detention meant carved scars. Her ministry-approved curriculum gutted defense against the dark arts, reducing it to theory. She justified it all in the name of order, yet even here, traces of her forgotten nature flickered. She was not a Death Eater, she despised chaos, she believed she was right. When she banned the Quibbler, she called it dangerous misinformation. When she formed the Inquisitorial Squad, she spoke of student empowerment. When she banned organizations, she used the word safety. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was warped idealism. The girl who once craved fairness now enforced her own twisted version of it. In Order of the Phoenix, when Hermione lured Umbridge into the Forbidden Forest, something revealing occurred. Faced with the centaurs, Umbridge did not reach for her wand immediately. She invoked laws. Law 15B of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. She tried to warn them. It was the last weapon she understood: bureaucracy. Even in terror, she believed that rules would protect her. That if she cited enough ministry articles, she would be safe. She did not understand the primal world beyond her papers. What would she have become in Hufflepuff? In another life, perhaps she might have learned patience. Under Professor Sprout, she might have discovered community. Among kind-hearted students like Cedric Digory or Hannah Abbott, perhaps she would have absorbed softness, not resentment. Maybe her ambition would have tempered into responsibility. Maybe she would have found pride in being fair, not feared. But the world did not offer Dolores Umbridge that mercy. Instead, she rose in a ministry that rewarded obedience and ruthlessness. Her Hufflepuff diligence decayed into fanaticism. Her yearning for justice became a hunger for control. Her respect for rules became a weapon. She wore pink cardigans and lace collars. Her office was decorated with plates of meowing kittens. But these were masks, attempts to dress her rigidity in sweetness. Students joked about her girlish decor, but no one laughed when she punished them. "I must not tell lies," Harry wrote, blood welling on his hand. In that moment, Dolores believed she was teaching him truth. Number 17, Lily Potter. The Sorting Hat hesitated. On the head of 11-year-old Lily Evans, it paused longer than it would for most. Her mind shimmered with curiosity, independence, and a subtle but potent defiance of conformity. The hat, ancient and perceptive, peered into the girl's thoughts and found a thirst for knowledge so bright it nearly blinded. It saw flashes of an inquisitive spirit, hours spent flipping through books well beyond her age, and a fierce refusal to allow the opinions of others to define her. It also saw, deep within, the burning ember of bravery, of sacrificial love not yet tested. A tricky one, the Sorting Hat murmured in her mind. Lily Evans, before she became a Potter, before her name was woven into prophecy and martyrdom, was a girl of intellect. Petunia once sneered that Lily always knew she was special, but in truth, Lily's gifts were accompanied by a grounded awareness of the responsibility they carried. Her magical aptitude had not manifested as arrogance, but as a tool, an instrument to understand and protect. She read obsessively, sometimes hiding under her blankets with a muggle flashlight, just to finish another passage on complex charms. By the time she boarded the Hogwarts Express, Lily could perform simple spells without a wand, an astonishing feat for someone yet unschooled. The Sorting Hat saw this and considered Ravenclaw. That house, noble in its own way, would have welcomed Lily with open arms. Rowena Ravenclaw's descendants would have cherished her inquisitiveness, her originality, her quiet resistance to conformity. While Ravenclaws like Luna Lovegood would one day be known for their dreamy eccentricity, Lily's intelligence bore a sharper edge. It was analytical, deliberate, and fiercely independent. She did not learn to impress, she learned to understand. Professor Slughorn, who taught her in potions, later told Harry that Lily was one of the brightest he ever taught. Vivacious, charming, the kind of student you wish every class had. She could brew complex mixtures by instinct, yet it wasn't only intellect. She questioned methods, invented shortcuts, and found new ways to enhance traditional brews. That kind of innovation is rare, and Ravenclaw would have been a natural home for it. The hat lingered on this thought. Yet something tugged. Beyond books and wand work, Lily Evans possessed an extraordinary emotional intuition. She read people as easily as spells. She understood that knowledge without compassion was useless. In her very first weeks at Hogwarts, she stood up to a group of third years who were mocking a shy Hufflepuff. She hadn't needed to, no one asked her to, but she did. She marched into the middle of the corridor and demanded they stop. That same moral clarity would one day define her final act of bravery. But in those early days, her strength lay in quiet rebellions. She chose to befriend Severus Snape when others shunned him, not out of pity, but out of a belief that no one should be discarded. When classmates whispered about his strange interests in the dark arts, Lily challenged the narrative. "He's brilliant," she once told Marlene McKinnon. "He just needs someone to believe that." Her loyalty was never blind, but her faith in people ran deep. This, too, could have marked her for Hufflepuff, but her spirit was too forceful, too exacting. Ravenclaw, however, remained a strong contender in the Hat's mind. Lily's love for learning wasn't passive, it had teeth. She dissected knowledge the way an artist critiques form. There was purpose to every question, a meaning behind every insight. In her fourth year, she submitted a revised theory on the limiting boundaries of non-verbal spellcasting to Professor Flitwick. It wasn't part of the curriculum. She had just wanted to understand how emotion influenced silent spellwork. The charm master was stunned. In another life, Lily might have grown into one of the ministry's leading magical theorists. She might have worked in the Department of Mysteries, deciphering the unseen threads of magical lore. Her name could have been attached to laws of magical physics and properties of wand lore. In that version of the world, she would have lived. Her brilliance would have glowed in scholarly journals instead of being dimmed by Voldemort's wand. And yet the Sorting Hat sensed something more immediate, a storm beneath the calm. Bravery, yes, but more than that, an instinct to protect, to shield others, even if it meant standing alone. In her fifth year, Lily joined a secret effort with other students to investigate early disappearances that the ministry would not acknowledge. The Daily Prophet had not yet spoken Voldemort's name, but Lily already knew the pattern. She wrote to her Muggle-born cousins about strange happenings and warned them to be cautious. She crafted protective charms in secret, hoping to equip her friends. The Sorting Hat reflected on her stubbornness, her unwillingness to walk away from injustice. She was not content to simply understand the world. She wanted to fight for what was right in it. When Severus called her a mudblood, after being humiliated by the marauders, Lily's world shifted. Her voice shook when she told him, "You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine." Her decision hurt, but it was made with the same clarity that had guided her all along. The Lily who sat beneath the Sorting Hat may not have known yet what courage would demand of her, but the seeds were there. Her love was not soft, it was forged in iron. Years later, she would make a choice that Ravenclaw could never require of her. She would walk into the nursery, unarmed, and place herself between her child and death. James Potter, her future husband and fellow Gryffindor, often said that Lily was the braver one. While James had been reckless and impulsive in youth, Lily's bravery was deliberate. She did not seek glory. She acted when no one was watching. When her parents passed away in her 7th year, Lily returned to school after only a week. Not because she had to, but because she had work to finish. In grief, she found purpose. The Sorting Hat considered that pain. It also saw her hope. It saw how Lily dreamed of a better world even as the shadows deepened. Her letters to Sirius and Remus were filled with worry, but also with plans. "We'll win this, I know it. There's too much good left," she had once written. That relentless optimism, that refusal to surrender even in the face of a darkening sky, tilted the scales. Had she been sorted into Ravenclaw, she might have influenced that house with a more grounded form of idealism. Her presence could have challenged the aloofness sometimes found among its elite. She would have formed friendships across house lines, refusing to be bound by labels. Perhaps her influence might have softened Snape's dissent, or perhaps the distance would have accelerated it. One cannot help but wonder what Lily's life in Ravenclaw Tower would have been. Would she have met James the same way? Would the rivalry have burned so hot between them, separated by different house tables? Would her patience for his antics have been thinner, or would her interest in him only grow because he was different, because he challenged her? The answer is lost to time, like so much else. But even within Gryffindor, Lily never quite fit the stereotype. She wasn't reckless like James, or loud like Sirius. Her courage manifested differently. It was a flame, not a sword. It burned quietly, persistently, and in the end it lit the path for her son, for the world. The Sorting Hat had seen all this in potential. It did not choose lightly. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. Talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But then the hat had paused. In her heart it saw the kind of love that bends time, a willingness to give everything for another. And it knew such love would one day change the course of history. So it placed her in Gryffindor. Not because Ravenclaw was wrong, but because Gryffindor was destiny. Her mind would be remembered by professors, her beauty by friends, but it was her sacrifice that would become legend. The girl who could have pursued knowledge instead chose love. The woman who might have reshaped the laws of magic instead shattered the darkest curse through her death. In the end, that's what made Lily Evans more than brilliant. It made her eternal. Number 18, Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew was not the kind of boy who turned heads when he entered a room. He trailed behind others, particularly those stronger in voice, presence, or confidence. During his first year at Hogwarts, his entrance into Gryffindor caused little fanfare. He wasn't bold like James Potter, charming like Sirius Black, or kind-eyed like Remus Lupin. He was pale, nervous, eager to please, and almost forgettable, except to those who recognized the quiet, almost feral desperation in his eyes. The Sorting Hat's decision to place Peter in Gryffindor has puzzled many readers. Gryffindor is the house of the brave, the daring, the ones who meet danger with unflinching resolve. But from his earliest years, Peter seemed more the boy who sought protection than offered it. The kind who smiled when others laughed, not because he understood the joke, but because he feared what silence might cost. A boy whose loyalty was always a calculation, and still he wore red and gold. What if the hat had chosen differently? It considered Slytherin. He was always a bit of a hanger-on, Sirius once said bitterly in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Wormtail? He worshipped James, followed him around like a dog. Yet, following is a trait that might have flourished differently in Hufflepuff, where companionship and loyalty weren't currency, but core values. Had Peter been placed among those who valued effort over talent, kindness over dominance, perhaps he might have become a different man, one who didn't feel the need to shapeshift, literally and metaphorically, to survive. Even Slytherin, often unfairly branded the House of Villains, might have suited him better. Slytherins are survivors. They are ambitious, cunning, and willing to take any path to their goal. Peter's eventual betrayal of the Potters wasn't born from a single moment of weakness, but from a slow accumulation of fear, envy, and self-interest. It was a Slytherin's logic, cold, effective, and calculated. Voldemort offered power, protection, and an escape from being the weakest member of a pack. Peter said yes. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore acknowledges the power of choices. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. But what if a child, barely 11, doesn't know who he truly is? What if he's already playing a role, already choosing proximity to safety over authenticity? The Sorting Hat listens to a child's desires. That is its flaw and its grace. For Peter, the desire to be near James, cool, confident, and destined for greatness, may have been louder than any whisper of inner truth. Gryffindor demanded courage, but Peter's courage was never the kind that shone in daylight. His bravery was born of terror. It showed itself in panicked decisions, desperate self-preservation, and quiet betrayals. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, he pleads with Sirius and Remus, "I was scared. I didn't mean it. He, who must not be named, forced me." There is no gallantry in his voice, only terror. He had lived in hiding for over a decade as Scabbers the Rat, willing to live among humans as vermin rather than face death. No Gryffindor would make peace with such cowardice, but a Slytherin might admire the ingenuity. There are moments, fleeting and painful, when Peter's Gryffindor identity tries to surface. In the Deathly Hallows, he hesitates. Harry reminds him of a life debt. "You owe me, Wormtail," he says. For a second, Pettigrew falters. His own silver hand, gifted by Voldemort, kills him for this momentary lapse. It is not a redemption arc, but it is a crack in the armor. Perhaps deep inside there was a boy who once believed in friendship, but the man he became had long buried him. Had Peter been sorted into Hufflepuff, the pressures might have been different. No longer surrounded by legends in the making, Peter may have grown more organically. In a house that doesn't breed pecking orders, his identity might not have become so codependent. The Badger House does not glamorize heroics, it rewards quiet perseverance. Peter might have learned the kind of bravery that builds slowly, not the one that combusts in moments of panic. But instead, Gryffindor became a mask. Peter played the role of the plucky friend, the loyal sidekick, the unnoticed shadow. He wasn't required to lead, just to follow. He did loyally until loyalty demanded too much. In the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius says, "The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters." But Peter was never fully either. He was a chameleon, dangerous not because he was strong, but because he was weak in a world that demanded strength. One could argue that Peter's sorting was the Hat's only real failure. Not because Peter betrayed his friends, but because the Hat believed the environment wouldn't break him. It placed him beside giants, James, Sirius, and Remus, boys with raw power, charm, and intellect. Peter, meanwhile, shrank. And as he shrank, he watched. He learned the art of invisibility long before he became an animagus. He learned when to smile, when to nod, when to echo. These weren't Gryffindor skills. These were the tools of survival. By third year, James and Sirius began suspecting Peter's limitations. He was the weakest link in their group of marauders, and it showed. But instead of addressing it, they pulled him closer. They taught him the secrets of animagus transformation, not because he earned it, but because he needed it. As a rat, Peter thrived. He eavesdropped, spied, hid. He embodied his own fear. Ironically, it was this very skill that Voldemort later found useful. When the Potters went into hiding, Dumbledore recommended Sirius as their secret keeper. But Sirius, ever the strategist, suggested Peter instead, precisely because no one would suspect him. And that, perhaps, is the most damning insight into Peter's place within the Gryffindor Brotherhood. He wasn't trusted because he was brave. He was trusted because he was invisible. He was the blank space on a map, the quiet corner no one noticed. And that was his power. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, "You are protected, in short, by your ability to love." But Peter's love, if it existed, was always conditional. He clung to those who could protect him. He mirrored their emotions, their causes, their enemies. He became what others needed him to be until it was no longer safe. Then he slipped away into the shadows, into the arms of power. Some readers argue the Sorting Hat saw something in Peter, some flicker of potential, some hidden reserve of courage. But the hat is not infallible. It is old, steeped in the traditions of Hogwarts, and perhaps too easily swayed by a child's plea. If Peter begged to be with James, the hat might have complied. It is not the first time it has done so. It almost placed Harry in Slytherin after all. Not Slytherin, Harry whispered. And the hat listened. Imagine an alternate Hogwarts where Peter sat beneath the Hufflepuff banner, surrounded by students like Cedric Digory, honest, humble, fair. Peter might have grown differently. He might have learned that value does not come from proximity to greatness, but from self-worth. In Hufflepuff, his fear could have been understood, not mocked. His small victories celebrated, not overshadowed. His loyalty tested in quieter, more meaningful ways. Or consider Slytherin. In that green-draped common room beneath the lake, Peter's ambition would have found fertile soil. Surrounded by students who prized resourcefulness and self-preservation, he might have sharpened his intellect rather than stifled it. His eventual betrayal of the Order of the Phoenix was not a Slytherin act, it was a Gryffindor failure. The house that claimed to prize courage left no room for his kind of fear. There is a reason Voldemort trusted Peter. He was not a leader, but he was a survivor. He brought Voldemort back to life with trembling hands. He lived as a rat among enemies for years. He cut off his own hand to serve his master. These are not the deeds of a coward. They are the deeds of a man whose bravery is corrupted by fear, whose loyalty is transactional, whose soul was never fully aligned with the house that claimed him. Peter's story serves as a cautionary tale. Not every misstep is born of malice. Some are born of neglect, of being in the wrong place, under the wrong banner, surrounded by expectations that crush rather than cultivate. Gryffindor's lion never fit Peter. He wasn't a lion, he was a rat, but not because he was despicable, because he was trying to disappear. And perhaps that is the great irony of Peter Pettigrew, a man remembered not for his house, but for how thoroughly he betrayed it. A Gryffindor in name, but never in spirit. A boy who might have found his true self in another common room, one that asked not for greatness, but for honesty. Number 19, Cedric Digory. Cedric Digory was not the type to chase attention. He didn't need to speak loudly or prove himself through arrogance. Those who knew him, and even those who merely saw him walk across the Hogwarts grounds, could tell he was solid, centered, and sincere. The Hufflepuff crest on his chest was not just a schoolhouse emblem, it was a reflection of his quiet determination, his sense of loyalty, and a fairness that never seemed to falter. Yet there was something else. Something more. Beneath his courteous demeanor lived a powerful current of courage, the kind that did not need to announce itself. It pulsed through his actions, his decisions, and his sacrifices. And in that current, the Sorting Hat might have seen another destiny for Cedric Digory, one draped not in yellow and black, but in the red and gold of Gryffindor. The day the Triwizard Champions were announced, Cedric stood tall, not with pride, but with calm. There was no grin of victory, no celebratory jeering, just a measured nod and the quiet acceptance of a challenge that demanded not only magical skill but strength of character. It was clear to everyone in the Great Hall that Cedric was a worthy champion. Even those who jeered at Harry's unexpected selection could not deny Cedric's Place had been earned. Dumbledore himself said, "He is, as you know, a fine student and a credit to Hogwarts." Cedric didn't beam at the praise. He simply bowed his head slightly, modestly. That was Cedric, a Hufflepuff in values, but in the crucible of the tournament, he began to show the traits that would have made the Sorting Hat pause. The first task revealed more than just skill with a wand. Facing a Hungarian horntail, perhaps the most brutal of the dragons, Cedric showed not only strategic thinking, but unshakable nerve. His approach was calculated, yes, but it required the kind of daring that few students would possess. When the crowd watched him exit the enclosure, clutching the golden egg, his expression was more of quiet relief than triumph. He didn't bask in applause. He did not puff his chest, but he had done something only a true Gryffindor would do: stand his ground against fear and danger, not for glory, but because it was asked of him. Between tasks, Cedric's actions continued to echo the values of both his house and another. When he learned that Harry had warned him about the dragons, indirectly, but sincerely, he didn't shrug it off or pretend he didn't need the help. He sought Harry out, and in return gave him a crucial clue about the second task. "Take a bath," he had told Harry, referring to the secret of the golden egg. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In the competitive fire of the tournament, Cedric didn't hoard advantage, he shared it. He understood what it meant to be fair, to level the playing field, even when the stakes were life and death. That kind of honor belonged in both Hufflepuff and Gryffindor. By the time of the second task, the school had already formed factions. Cedric had supporters who painted banners, who shouted chants, but Cedric himself never encouraged division. In fact, when Rita Skeeter's poisonous articles attempted to pit him against Harry, portraying them as bitter rivals, Cedric refused to play along. He remained graceful in the face of gossip, never retaliating. This was not passivity, it was restraint, a strength few recognized. Gryffindor courage is often seen in the battlefield charge, in bold speeches and defiant stances. But Cedric's courage was the quiet kind, the type that forgives, that doesn't stoop to insult, that walks away from conflict without cowardice. The third task, the maze, was where Cedric's inner Gryffindor emerged most clearly. The hedges towered like walls of fate, pulsing with magic, bending reality. Cedric entered that maze not just as a competitor, but as someone carrying the hopes of a house, a school, and a generation of younger students who saw in him a model of excellence. Inside the maze, danger lurked in every shadow. There were blast-ended scroots, boggarts, and enchanted barriers. But what Cedric encountered was far more telling than magical obstacles. He encountered choice, and the choices he made were the clearest indication of who he truly was. He was the first to see Harry struggle against an enormous acromantula. And though he had every right to leave Harry behind, to race ahead, to claim the cup for himself, he didn't. He turned back. He cast spells. He fought beside Harry not as a rival, but as a brother in arms. He chose to risk his life to help another champion. That was not a Hufflepuff obligation. That was Gryffindor bravery, the kind born not from the desire for victory, but from the refusal to let another fall. When they reached the cup, side by side, panting, bleeding, battered, Cedric again had the chance to claim the glory. Harry urged him to take it. Cedric refused. "No," he said, "you take it. You should win." But Harry, equally stubborn, insisted they both touch the cup together. They did. It was not a prize, it was a portkey. And what awaited them was no cheering crowd. In the graveyard, surrounded by tombstones and shadows, Cedric stood with his wand raised, confused, yes, but not paralyzed. When Peter Pettigrew emerged from the darkness, when the form of Voldemort began to take shape, Cedric didn't scream, he didn't run, he turned, ready to fight. It was over in a flash. "Kill the spare," Voldemort hissed. And in an instant, Cedric Digory fell. Just like that. No final words, no farewell, just the silence of a life extinguished too soon. But his death was not in vain. His death changed Harry. It changed the war. Dumbledore would later speak of Cedric's death as something pure, a murder without justification, a symbol of what Voldemort's return truly meant. "Remember Cedric Digory," he said, his voice trembling with both sorrow and steel. "He was murdered by Lord Voldemort. The Ministry does not want me to tell you this, but Cedric Digory was murdered." And every student in that room knew Cedric was no mere Hufflepuff champion. He had been a symbol of what was good and brave and just. Even in his last moments, Cedric never begged. He never pleaded. His presence in that graveyard, wand ready, posture firm, it was a final act of defiance, a Gryffindor's instinct in a Hufflepuff's heart. It was bravery without reward, heroism without hope of escape. That moment, brief as it was, elevated him forever in the eyes of those who had only seen him as the handsome prefect or the talented Quidditch captain. There's a reason Harry told Cedric's parents that he had died a hero. It wasn't to soothe them, it was the truth. Cedric had walked into darkness and faced death with his head held high. And more than that, he had lived his life with integrity. He had loved Cho Chang with sincerity, treated younger students with respect, stood up against unfairness without theatrics, and faced each challenge with both humility and grace. The Sorting Hat sees a student's potential, not just their present qualities. When it sat on Cedric's head years before the tournament, perhaps it hesitated, perhaps it saw that pulse of fire within him, the spark of boldness, of readiness to act, of moral courage. Gryffindor would have welcomed him gladly, and he would have done them proud, but the hat, as always, made its decision based on where a student could grow, not just where they could belong. Hufflepuff was the soil that nourished Cedric's roots, but the fruit he bore, the choices he made, ripened into something much wider. He became a bridge between houses, an example to both the daring and the diligent, to the brave and the loyal. And in that synthesis he became something greater than a house label. He became an ideal. When future students read about Cedric Digory, they may see his name in the lists of fallen heroes. They may see his face in old photographs and feel the pang of what might have been, but they should also see the complexity in his character, because the truth is that Cedric's legacy is not confined to the halls of Hufflepuff. His name belongs equally in Gryffindor lore, not because he wore their colours, but because he embodied their values. Gryffindor House has known many who were loud, fierce, and openly defiant. Cedric was not like them. His courage was not the storm, but the mountain, unmoving, dignified, steady. In a world that often mistakes volume for valour, Cedric Digory reminded us that the quietest hearts can hold the loudest truths. He did not shout his beliefs, he lived them. The Sorting Hat once told Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Cedric's choices, time and again, showed the world that courage is not always forged in battle cries or duels. Sometimes it's in offering a hand to a rival, in telling the truth when it's hard, in giving up a victory because it feels wrong to win that way, in standing beside a friend, not behind them. And so, when students sit on the stool beneath the Sorting Hat's brim, they might wonder where they belong. Cedric Digory's story is a reminder that belonging is not confinement, that a Hufflepuff can have the heart of a Gryffindor, that bravery doesn't always wear armour. Sometimes it wears a smile, and sometimes it dies with its wand raised, unafraid. In the quiet halls of Hogwarts, his name still echoes. Cedric, a Hufflepuff, yes, but more than that, a Gryffindor in spirit, a true champion, a silent lion. Number 20, Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady. The Grey Lady glided silently through the vaulted corridors of Hogwarts, barely noticed by the students who passed her. Few of them gave thought to who she had been in life. They knew her only as the sombre ghost of Ravenclaw Tower, her spectral form wrapped in melancholy and silence. But beneath her ethereal exterior lived a memory. Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of one of the most brilliant witches in wizarding history. Though her legacy was shaped by knowledge and intellect, there had been a moment in her life where her path could have twisted in an entirely different direction. Helena was born under the weight of expectation. As the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, founder of the house known for wisdom, learning, and wit, Helena's very existence was measured by comparison. Every word she read, every spell she cast, every glance from a professor or a student, each was filtered through the lens of her mother's looming shadow. And yet, from a young age, Helena showed remarkable promise. Her intellect was dazzling, even by Ravenclaw standards. Her essays delved deeper than required. Her understanding of magical theory surpassed many of her professors. But along with her genius came something darker, an unrelenting pride. It was this pride that stirred restlessness in her heart. She did not wish merely to match her mother. She yearned to outshine her. It wasn't enough to be another Ravenclaw prodigy. Helena wanted to be remembered as more brilliant than Rowena. She wanted her own legacy, her own name etched into the foundation of magical history. And so, when she discovered the existence of her mother's diadem, a legendary artifact said to enhance the wisdom of its wearer, she saw in it more than a family heirloom. She saw a shortcut to becoming the greatest witch of her age. There is a fine line between ambition and the desire for knowledge. The Sorting Hat, that ancient arbiter of student destinies, must have paused when it first examined Helena's mind. Her intellect shone like a beacon, curious, sharp, boundless. But wrapped around that brilliance was a tenacious ambition, the kind that would not rest until it was fulfilled. A whisper of something serpentine, perhaps. She was cunning, undeniably. She did not just want to learn, she wanted to rise above. The Hat may well have pondered the house of Salazar Slytherin for her, a place where ambition was cherished, where power was cultivated, where legacies were built upon ruthless determination. Yet it chose Ravenclaw. And perhaps for a time that choice seemed right. Helena flourished within the Blue and Bronze Tower. She devoured knowledge, read obsessively, debated fiercely. Her professors praised her, her peers admired her from afar. But Ravenclaw's halls, for all their brilliance, could not soothe the inferno of competition burning within her. It was not enough to know. She had to be known. Her thirst for identity, distinct from her mother's, consumed her. The pivotal moment in Helena's life came not during a classroom triumph, but in an act of theft. She took the diadem, stole it. This was not the act of a student seeking enlightenment, but of a daughter seeking separation. The diadem, enchanted to amplify the wisdom of its wearer, symbolized everything Rowena stood for. In taking it, Helena did more than commit betrayal. She declared independence. She fled Hogwarts, abandoning everything her house valued, discipline, reason, and tradition. What's striking is the motivation behind the theft. It was not simple rebellion. Helena believed that the diadem would grant her the strength to become greater than her mother. This desire echoes the very heart of Slytherin's ideals: ambition, self-determination, legacy. The diadem became her philosopher's stone. It was not wisdom she chased, but greatness, and through power. As she vanished into the forests of Albania, she believed she had freed herself. But shadows trailed her, among them a man who had once loved her. The Bloody Baron, then not yet a ghost, followed Helena out of loyalty, obsession, and perhaps a desperate hope to save her. But Helena's pride had hardened into defiance. She refused his pleas, and so he murdered her, and then, overcome with horror, took his own life. The irony is bitter. In her quest to become more than her mother's daughter, Helena became a cautionary tale. Her story mirrors the downfall of many Slytherins, ambition consumed by its own fire. And yet she is remembered as a Ravenclaw. Why? Because at the centre of her turmoil lay a belief that knowledge could set her free. Unlike Slytherins who seek dominion, Helena sought to redefine identity through wisdom. Her theft of the diadem was a tragic miscalculation, a merging of pride and intellect, a belief that knowledge, when magnified, would render her not just smart, but legendary. Rowena's reaction to her daughter's theft and disappearance reveals the fracture between them. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the Grey Lady tells Harry, "My mother, they say she never spoke of me to anyone. If she had, perhaps she would have found me before I died." These words reflect not only the pain of abandonment, but also the mutual pride that severed their bond. Neither mother nor daughter could reach across the chasm of expectation and disappointment. One must wonder what the Sorting Hat saw in Helena during that brief moment of decision. Did it see the flash of green as she thought of outshining Rowena? Did it feel the serpentine hunger to be the best, the most remembered, the most powerful? Or did it also glimpse something else, an insatiable hunger for understanding, not dominance? Perhaps it saw a girl desperate to belong, not to her mother's legacy, but to a legacy of her own making. It is fitting, in a way, that the ghost of Helena chose silence over speech for much of her afterlife. The Grey Lady haunts Ravenclaw Tower not as a teacher or a guide, but as a reminder. Her presence is not one of warmth or mentorship, but of mourning. She is the embodiment of intelligence unmoored from humility. Her eyes carry the weight of a choice made in youth and regretted for eternity. She could have been a Slytherin, and a brilliant one. Among the serpents, she would have found others who understood the desire to forge greatness. Her intellect would have been weaponized, her ambition nurtured. She might have become a powerful political figure or a feared academic sorceress. But would she have found peace? It was Ravenclaw that gave Helena the tools to think, but not the wisdom to feel. Slytherin might have taught her to win, but not to love. In the end, neither house could cure the pride that separated her from her mother, nor the ambition that sent her to her death. But the choice of Ravenclaw still speaks to something deep within her, a belief that knowledge, at its core, was redemptive. Even centuries later, when Harry meets her ghost in the final book, Helena's story is a revelation. She confesses her theft, her pride, her shame. "I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother. I ran away with her diadem." In this moment she is no longer the untouchable Grey Lady. She is Helena, a woman who made a Slytherin's mistake with a Ravenclaw's heart. What makes Helena such a fascinating figure is the complexity of her identity. She is not just a ghost or a daughter or a thief. She is a mirror for the very question the Sorting Hat asks every student. Who are you, really? The Hat does not choose based on lineage or appearance. It dives deep into the soul. And for Helena, that soul was a battleground. Rowena Ravenclaw is said to have died of a broken heart. The loss of her daughter, the silence, the betrayal, the unresolved love, broke even the strongest mind in Hogwarts history. There is a cruelty to this fate. For all her wisdom, Rowena could not teach Helena the value of forgiveness, nor could she receive it herself. Two brilliant minds lost in parallel pride. To speak of Helena as a Ravenclaw who could have been a Slytherin is not to question her house placement, but to acknowledge her human complexity. The houses are not rigid boxes, they are lenses, and Helena's story is a kaleidoscope. She was cunning, yes. Ambitious, undeniably. But her choices were shaped by intellect, not manipulation. Her crime was pride, not evil. Her fate was not punishment, but consequence. In many ways, Helena's legacy endures not through the ghost that haunts the tower, but through the artifact she stole. The diadem, hidden for centuries, became a Horcrux, defiled by Voldemort, another student whose ambition exceeded his wisdom. and it was destroyed by fire in the Room of Requirement, that ever-shifting space within the heart of Hogwarts, just as Helena's legacy was shaped by seeking what was not required, glory over guidance, power over peace. And so she floats still, a whisper in Ravenclaw Tower, as students chase knowledge with parchment and quill. Few know her story, fewer understand her pain, but the Sorting Hat might remember. And perhaps, as it rests between each ceremony, it thinks of her, the girl who could have worn green and silver, but chose blue and bronze, or perhaps it chose for her. And perhaps in some way it was wrong, or perhaps it was right, because Helena Ravenclaw is not just the Grey Lady, she is the house's question come alive. Number 21, Lily Luna Potter. When Lily Luna Potter stepped onto the platform at King's Cross Station, she was not just the daughter of Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley. She was a legacy, one woven from generations of magic, courage, and rebellion. Yet beneath her flaming red hair and cheeky smile lived a complexity that fan discussions often ignore. The Sorting Hat, a sentient relic older than the school itself, might have seen a tapestry of qualities in her that reached beyond the bold red of Gryffindor. Some whispered of Ravenclaw, not as a distant possibility, but as a true calling, echoing through the generations from her grandmother, Lily Evans. Lily Luna's upbringing was unlike anyone else's. Her home echoed with stories of bravery, rebellion, and sacrifice, but it also echoed with books, piles of them. Her mother, Ginny, while brave and mischievous, often reminded her children of the importance of understanding the world before acting within it. And her father, Harry, though forever known as the boy who lived, had learned the hard way that intuition alone could not solve every mystery. He had been saved time and again by Hermione's intellect, by Dumbledore's knowledge, and even by Snape's bitter logic. Lily Luna absorbed all these lessons. She was a child who dared to read between the lines. From her earliest years, Lily demonstrated a curiosity that bordered on obsession. While James was busy reenacting Quidditch victories in the garden, and Albus buried himself in cautious questions about legacy and shadow, Lily asked different things. She once wrote to her grandmother Molly asking whether magical memory could be transferred between generations. Her bookshelf included Magical Theory by Adelbert Waffling at age 10. Her letters from home to Hugo and Rose Weasley speculated about magical auras and the metaphysical connections between wands and wizard souls. There was in her something analytical, something that longed not just to be brave, but to understand what bravery meant and where it came from. There is an oft-overlooked moment in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone when the Sorting Hat pauses on Hermione Granger. It said. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. So where shall I put you? It ends up choosing Gryffindor, but Hermione could have been a Ravenclaw. Lily Luna, some fans suggest, might have been the reverse. Someone who was sorted into Gryffindor, but whose natural home could just as easily have been Ravenclaw. Perhaps she was destined for blue and bronze instead of scarlet and gold. The idea of Lily Luna being more than a textbook Gryffindor is not born of speculation alone. Ginny Weasley once described her daughter to Luna Lovegood in a letter archived in the fan-collected Potter family correspondence as the brightest spark in a room who sees more than she speaks. Luna, ever attuned to hidden truths, reportedly replied, "Perhaps she sees the rackspurts of logic clearer than any of us." If Luna, that eccentric prophet of insight, saw such clarity in Lily, perhaps the Sorting Hat would too. The Potter lineage certainly leans Gryffindor, but Lily Evans, Harry's mother, belonged to that rare category of Muggle-born students whose Ravenclaw-worthy intellect could have shone just as brightly in blue and bronze. She was known for her cleverness, her ability to master complex charms with ease, and her willingness to question everything, from the purity of bloodlines to the rigidity of magical traditions. Her talent with potions impressed even Slughorn, Her debates with young Severus Snape over dark magic, memory, and morality were not those of a hot-headed Gryffindor, but of a young witch whose Ravenclaw heart beat with intellectual integrity. Lily Luna carried that same questioning spark. She once asked her Uncle Ron why no one ever challenged the Sorting Hat's decisions. "It's a hat," Ron had joked, "not the Ministry of Magic." But she persisted, reading accounts of unusual sortings and compiling stories of students who had regrets. She was fascinated by the hat stall phenomenon and once wrote an essay titled "The Four Houses, One Soul," which reportedly earned her a recommendation from Professor Flitwick before her first term even began. Some believe that her sorting was, in fact, a hat stall, those rare moments when the Sorting Hat debates for over 5 minutes. The only known hat stalls in canon were Minerva McGonagall and Peter Pettigrew. McGonagall was torn between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, a parallel that speaks volumes about the potential duality in Lily Luna. Like McGonagall, she was driven by duty and intellect. But unlike McGonagall, she was growing up in a world no longer divided by war, a world where choosing a path could mean shaping it, not surviving it. Inside Hogwarts, Lily Luna's first year was marked by unusual friendships. She gravitated toward the eccentric, the curious, the forgotten corners of the library. She bonded with a Ravenclaw named Anya Whitcross, who spent her evenings categorizing magical anomalies. Together they investigated the ghost who roamed near the 4th-floor corridor reciting ancient arithmancy formulas. Lily wasn't just interested in spells, she was interested in why spells worked, in who created them, in whether they could evolve. By her second year, Professor Sinistra had called her a cosmic mind in Gryffindor robes, and her astronomy charts were being passed round the Ravenclaw common room. She had a theory that certain constellations enhanced spell efficacy, a theory she tried to test during a dueling club event, resulting in a burst of magic that turned a suit of armor into dancing runes for 10 minutes. Professors were torn between praise and concern. The Ravenclaws invited her to their study sessions. Gryffindors sometimes rolled their eyes at her need to ask 5 more questions. Yet she was fiercely loyal. When a Slytherin named Darius Greengrass accused Rose Weasley of cheating during a Transfiguration practical, it was Lily who stood up, publicly challenged the accusation, and forced an apology from the boy during dinner in front of 3 professors. That act, bold, unflinching, and driven by justice, was pure Gryffindor. But the way she orchestrated it, collecting evidence, timing her confrontation, and ensuring witnesses, it spoke of Ravenclaw precision. Fans have often wondered what house the Sorting Hat would place someone who truly possessed all 4 qualities: bravery, wisdom, loyalty, and ambition. Some suggest such children go where they are needed most, not where they most resemble. Perhaps Lily Luna was Gryffindor not by personality, but by purpose. Maybe the hat saw in her not what she was, but what she was meant to be, a balance, a bridge. Even her name tells 2 stories. Lily, after her grandmother, gentle, clever, principled. Luna, after a woman who saw beyond sight, who lived in the margins and found truth in the odd. Lily Luna was born of magic that wasn't loud or boastful. It was deep, inward-facing, and curious. That blend, rare and potent, was always going to complicate her sorting. If Lily Luna had been sorted into Ravenclaw, the House of Wit and Wisdom would have gained a mind that questioned reality like Luna Lovegood and tested it like Lily Evans. She might have redefined what it meant to be a Ravenclaw, not just intellectual but empathetic, brave in her thinking, and unafraid of magical experimentation. She might have worked with Professor Vector to reimagine the curriculum or developed new spells that reflected emotional resonance instead of wand movement. Imagine then the legacy she could leave, a Ravenclaw who didn't simply master magic but reinvented it, a Gryffindor who didn't just rush into battle but paused to map the stars first, a child of Harry Potter who didn't only carry a wand but carried the question of what it meant to wield one. There was a day during her 4th year when a portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw is said to have whispered, "Curiosity without fear, that is the mark of the rarest mind." Lily Luna, standing alone in the tower during a storm, had listened. And she had smiled, because she knew that no matter which house she wore, her magic was larger than tradition. She was not divided into quarters. She was not defined by scarlet or blue. She was Lily Luna Potter, and she had the mind of a Ravenclaw. Number 22, Albus Severus Potter. Albus Severus Potter boarded the Hogwarts Express with a heart far heavier than his trunk. The weight wasn't only the burden of his famous last name, it was the internal storm of expectations, identity, and fear. While his brother James strutted through the station like a young version of their grandfather, Albus moved with the quiet caution of someone who didn't yet belong. His emerald eyes, so much like his father's, searched the crowd of first years as if hoping to find someone just as uncertain. The Sorting Hat would soon decide who he was meant to be, but deep down Albus feared that choice had already been made for him, and it might not be the one he wanted. Unlike James, who ended up in Gryffindor without question, Albus was different from the very beginning. He had his mother's intellect and a shadow of his father's courage, but something else stirred within him. A depth, a seriousness, a contemplative silence that didn't seem at home in the roaring common room of the lions. He thought about the stories his father told him, about how bravery came in many forms, but those words didn't settle his nerves, not when the fear of being sorted into Slytherin, the house of Snape, Malfoy, and so many others once considered dark, gnawed at him relentlessly. The moment the Sorting Hat touched his head, it knew. Albus didn't need to speak. The hat felt the whirlwind inside him. It saw potential for greatness, cleverness, ambition, but also deep uncertainty. The boy beneath the brim was torn in ways few children his age could be. He was the son of the Chosen One, named for 2 men on opposite ends of history, and grandson of a marauder who once bullied the very professor his middle name honored. The hat paused. Slytherin would help you on your path, it mused, and Albus froze. Some fans believe the hat did place him in Slytherin in the original timeline. Others think it still wavered, balancing between 2 destinies. Rowling herself left it ambiguous, a narrative crack through which imagination slipped. But what if Albus had indeed gone to Slytherin? What would that have meant? Not only for him, but for the legacy of both his namesakes. Slytherin would not have been a rejection of his father's legacy. It would have been an embrace of the other half of his name, Severus. Snape, the bravest man Harry Potter ever knew, wore green and silver robes. He walked the shadowed corridors of the dungeons not as a villain, but as a double agent, a man who suffered in silence, fighting his own war beneath the surface. Albus, with his introspective nature and sensitivity, bore echoes of that same quiet bravery. A boy who felt more than he spoke, who watched before acting, who thought deeply before choosing sides. When Scorpius Malfoy entered the train compartment, it wasn't James who invited him to sit. It wasn't Fred or Rose or any other child of Gryffindor legacy. It was Albus. And perhaps this small act, this choice of friendship, was the Sorting Hat's deciding factor. The bond that would grow between Albus and Scorpius wasn't just a narrative flourish. It was a symbol, a Potter and a Malfoy, a Gryffindor and a Slytherin. Or had the hat leaned the other way, 2 Slytherins defying every expectation. The 2 boys were mirror images of their father's rivalry, now inverted and reshaped. Scorpius, with his gentle demeanor and quiet intellect, was nothing like Draco at 11. Albus, wrestling with the overwhelming shadow of Harry Potter, sought refuge not in fame or adventure, but in friendship. Their connection was born of necessity, but forged through shared struggle. They would become the heart of the cursed child, not simply because of time-traveling hijinks, but because of what they represented, the healing of an old wound. Had Albus been placed in Slytherin, it might have altered the very core of the school's dynamics. His presence would have challenged the stereotypes of Slytherin House: cunning but cruel, ambitious but ruthless. Albus didn't fit that mold, and in not fitting, he might have helped reshape it. Just as Snape had defied expectations by becoming a hero, Albus might have done so by becoming a bridge. The boy who bore both names, Albus and Severus, could have become the symbol of unity Hogwarts never knew it needed. Even within the cursed child, Albus's discomfort in Gryffindor is evident. His struggle with legacy, with always being compared to his father, is palpable. His own line speaks volumes. Just because my dad is Harry Potter doesn't mean I'm good at everything. These aren't the words of a proud Gryffindor roaring into battle. These are the words of a boy crushed beneath a name. Slytherin, with its emphasis on individual ambition and self-discovery, might have offered Albus the freedom he needed. Freedom from expectation, from comparison, from legend. And yet Hogwarts does not always give us what we want. It gives us what we need. Perhaps that's why the Sorting Hat hesitated, because Albus didn't need to be in Slytherin to understand it. He only needed to know it wasn't a place of shame. When Harry told him, "Then Slytherin House will have gained a wonderful young wizard," it was more than a father comforting a nervous son. It was a passing of truth, hard-earned and honest. There are moments in the books where the house divides blur. Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, might easily have gone to Ravenclaw. Neville Longbottom, whose bravery took years to bloom, was nearly placed in Hufflepuff. And Harry himself, the quintessential Gryffindor, heard the Sorting Hat whisper, "You would do well in Slytherin." These moments matter. They remind us that the sorting is not a sentence, but a suggestion, that we are not bound by our house, but guided by it. Albus Severus Potter was born into contradiction. He carried the name of a headmaster who led with kindness and a spy who bled for love. In many ways, these opposing forces met inside him. His father saw it. Dumbledore might have called it a curious fusion, but the world expected clarity. It wanted another Harry, bold, brave, reckless. Instead, it received Albus, thoughtful, unsure, painfully human. Imagine Albus walking through the Slytherin common room for the first time. The room, with its green lamps and underwater windows, would feel foreign. But in that strangeness he might have found his path. He wouldn't be the hero. He wouldn't be the chosen one. He would simply be himself. A boy named after men who shaped the world through sacrifice, silence, and soul. His friendship with Scorpius might have deepened sooner in Slytherin, free from the judgment of other houses. They might have become the duo that redefined ambition, not as a thirst for power, but as a determination to fix the broken pieces of the past. In time, Albus might have become a prefect, then head boy, not by following in Harry's footsteps, but by carving his own. The other students would talk, of course. Some would call it favoritism, others would call it betrayal. But Albus would keep walking the way Snape did, quietly, purposefully, and with the weight of two legacies behind him. Maybe even Headmistress McGonagall would watch him and wonder whether she'd misjudged the son of Harry Potter, just as she once misjudged the boy who became Severus Snape. Slytherin House would have changed too. For decades, it was seen as the breeding ground of the worst: Voldemort, Bellatrix, the Carrows. Even Draco, though redeemed in the end, carried the scars of his upbringing. Albus might have been the student to turn that tide. With his empathy and lineage, he could have redefined what it meant to be a Slytherin, not a villain in training, but a strategist of peace, a child who understood that power meant nothing without compassion. There's something poetic about the idea of the son of Harry Potter thriving in the house of his father's enemies. It would echo the reconciliation that Harry himself achieved in adulthood, shaking Draco's hand naming his son after Snape and acknowledging the complexity of good and evil. Albus in Slytherin would be the living proof that Hogwarts had changed, that the war had taught something real. Even the ghosts of Hogwarts might have watched him with curiosity. The Bloody Baron silent as ever, perhaps seeing in Albus a boy who would never be feared. The portraits might whisper, "That's Potter's son, but not like his father." And they'd be right. Albus wasn't like his father. He wasn't meant to be, and maybe that was the point. Years later, the students might forget the battles of old, but they would remember the boy with a famous name who didn't seek glory but healing, the one who walked the dungeons not with a sneer but with purpose, the one who made friends with the son of his father's enemy, not out of defiance but out of genuine kinship. Albus Severus Potter might never have slain a basilisk or duelled a Dark Lord. But in choosing compassion over legacy and friendship over pride, he would have done something far more difficult. He would have rewritten the story of his name, and in doing so, rewritten the legacy of Slytherin House. And somewhere, in a quiet portrait behind the headmaster's desk, an old man with half-moon spectacles might have smiled, watching the boy he never met fulfill the future he never saw. Number 23, Horace Slughorn. Horace Slughorn walked the halls of Hogwarts with a gait that seemed both calculated and careless, a contradiction that defined much of his personality. His emerald green robes brushed against the cold stone floor like a whisper, always clean, always impeccable, as though reflecting the image he so carefully cultivated, genial, approachable, but never without purpose. He was a man of connections, a master of the subtle art of influence, and though a Slytherin by sorting, one could not help but wonder whether the hat hesitated that day, perhaps picturing him among the blue and bronze rather than silver and green. The Slug Club, as it came to be known, was no ordinary social circle. It was a web, delicately woven, strategically extended, and always anchored by Slughorn's own brilliance and intuition. He selected members with precision, Lily Evans, whose talent in potions rivaled many grown wizards, Tom Riddle, whose charm masked darker aspirations, and Merlin himself only knew how many others had passed through those velvet-draped parlours, sipping crystallized pineapple juice and discussing the nuances of non-verbal spellwork. But the motive behind the club was not raw ambition, as might be expected from a traditional Slytherin. It was curiosity. Slughorn did not merely seek power, he sought excellence, elegance, and, above all, intellect. In the library archives of Hogwarts there remains a footnote in one of the older sorting hat records. In Professor Dippett's era, the hat once mused about a Slughorn boy, mind sharp as an Occam's scale and heart drawn to the gleam of knowledge like a moth to bluebell flames. Though the sorting hat never revealed its deliberations, one can imagine that the decision was not simple. Ravenclaw values wit and wisdom, not just intelligence, but the pursuit of it for its own sake. Slughorn in many ways embodied that pursuit more honestly than many Ravenclaws ever did. When he spoke of Felix Felicis in class, his eyes gleamed not with pride but fascination. It's liquid luck, yes, but more than that. Think of the intricacies, he would say, his voice rising ever so slightly. The precision, one extra drop of valerian root and it curdles into poison. His students remembered these moments not as lectures, but as storytelling. His lessons were riddles to be solved, puzzles presented with poetic elegance. Ravenclaw would have loved him. His office was a sanctuary of oddities. Crystalline jars shimmered on the shelves, housing pickled tentacula, powdered basilisk fang, and the occasional whispering bezoar murmuring secrets when the room fell quiet. These were not trophies. They were artifacts of a man enthralled by the arcane, the forgotten, and the rare. He was as much a collector of stories as he was of ingredients, and it is perhaps this trait that made him an exceptional teacher, but an even more exceptional candidate for Ravenclaw. What set Slughorn apart from his Slytherin colleagues was his lack of hunger for domination. He did not crave power in the way Tom Riddle did, nor did he manipulate for gain as Lucius Malfoy did. When young Harry Potter cornered him in that seaside cottage, disguised as an armchair to evade Dumbledore's visit, his fear was not for his own status. It was for the secrets he kept, the memories he held. "Don't think I don't know why you're here," he murmured. "What you want from me?" It was guilt that haunted him, not ambition. And guilt is a curious companion for a Slytherin. But for a Ravenclaw, someone who dissects decisions, who replays every moment like a chess match in their mind, it fits like an old cloak. Slughorn's regret over giving young Riddle the knowledge of Horcruxes was not rooted in the damage it caused to his reputation, but in the philosophical horror of what he had enabled. "I wouldn't tell him everything," he pleaded. "I didn't know he'd... How was I supposed to know?" His mind had connected the dots. He understood, more deeply than most, what had truly transpired. Lily Evans was perhaps the student who most exemplified Slughorn's preferences. She was talented, yes, but her charm lay in her thoughtful nature, her precision, her intuition. Slughorn once said of her, "One of the brightest I ever taught. Vivacious, you know, charming girl." And when he spoke of her death, it was with a sorrow so tangible one could almost hear the past echo in his voice. His admiration of her was not just admiration, it was reverence, the sort that only one scholar feels toward another. The Slug Club was not merely a way to elevate himself by proxy. It was his version of Ravenclaw's Riddle door, a selective gateway into deeper minds, into brilliance. He surrounded himself with people who might teach him something, surprise him, make him laugh in ways he hadn't expected. His friendship with Gwenog Jones, the fierce beater for the Holyhead Harpies, was not born from political strategy but from admiration for her wit and explosive opinions. He found fascination in complexity, and he nurtured it wherever he saw it bloom. One cannot ignore the academic rigor with which Slughorn approached potion-making. He was not content with the standard curriculum. The Half-Blood Prince's annotated textbook may have revealed a more radical approach to the craft, but Slughorn's own methodology was equally detailed, equally obsessive. He taught the theory behind the reaction of powdered moonstone with hellebore, described the exact temperature at which a draught of peace should be stirred, and spoke of the ancient origins of Polyjuice potion with near religious reverence. "It's not just about stirring," he'd mutter. "It's about understanding what each movement does, what it awakens." His presence at Slughorn's Christmas party, in Harry's 6th year, was a window into his soul. The decorations were charming but tasteful, the guest list a mosaic of personalities. There was not a hint of vanity in how he moved among them. He introduced Hermione Granger to Cormac McLaggen not because it would advance him socially, but because he thought it would be amusing to see how two high-achieving egos would interact. He was a sociologist in robes, a wizard who studied people as much as potions. Even his cowardice, when examined closely, bears Ravenclaw's fingerprints. He did not flee from danger in the manner of someone afraid of pain. He fled because he had calculated the risk and deemed it too great. It was logic, not weakness. "I'm just an old man," he once said. "I'm not made for fighting." But when the final battle came to Hogwarts, he returned, not because he had found courage, but because he had found cause. Slughorn was one of the few professors who treated the Battle of Hogwarts as a moment of academic reckoning. He did not rush into the fray blindly. He cast enchantments with efficiency, coordinated with McGonagall and Flitwick like a tactician. When he and Professor Sprout led reinforcements to defend the school, it was a calculated strike. He even duelled Voldemort alongside Kingsley and McGonagall, not with reckless bravery, but with the cool intellect of a man who understood spells, history, and magical theory in equal measure. The House of Ravenclaw prizes eccentricity. Slughorn, with his walrus moustache, flamboyant ties, and penchant for candied pineapple, would have felt perfectly at home among Rowena's descendants. His office would have stood among floating tomes and whispering busts, a haven of curiosity. He would have spent evenings discussing historical contradictions with Professor Binns, arguing magical ethics with Flitwick, and perhaps even penning essays for the Practical Potioneer, a journal he once cited in class with a wink. And yet, despite all of this, the Sorting Hat chose Slytherin. Why? Perhaps it was his love of exclusivity, not power, but selectivity. Slughorn didn't just seek out the brilliant, he sought out the brilliant and connected. He did not open his club to every bright student. He had preferences, favourites. He kept circles tight and secrets tighter. Ravenclaw may cherish open knowledge, but Slughorn enjoyed curation. His loyalty was not universal, it was specific. He loved his people, as he called them. I like to think I've had a hand in some of my more distinguished old students' rise to fame, he told Harry once, not boastfully, but with a kind of grandfatherly pride. He didn't just teach students, he adopted them into his intellectual lineage. That lineage was not based on virtue or courage or loyalty, but on merit, charm, and potential. And in that way, he echoed both Slytherin and Ravenclaw, never fully one or the other. When he finally gave Dumbledore the memory of Tom Riddle asking about Horcruxes, it wasn't ambition that had kept him silent all those years, it was shame. I did not know what he was doing. A Ravenclaw might have asked more questions. A Slytherin might have asked none. Slughorn had asked just enough to regret it forever. Years after the war, he continued teaching. His lessons grew quieter, more reflective. When he spoke of dark magic, there was a heaviness in his voice. When he brewed Amortentia, he allowed students to describe the sense they perceived, and then told stories of love gone wrong in the wizarding world, not to scare them, but to make them think. He taught with layers. He taught as a Ravenclaw might, not what to think, but how to think. In the end, Horace Slughorn was never just a Slytherin professor. He was a paradox, a man who held court with ministers of magic and goblin historians alike, who brewed elixirs with the precision of a sculptor and the curiosity of a philosopher. If he had walked through the Ravenclaw common room, answering riddles at the eagle-shaped door, few would have blinked. He would have belonged just as much. Number 24, Lavender Brown. Lavender Brown entered the world of Harry Potter as little more than a background name. Her mention in Philosopher's Stone as the first student to be sorted into Gryffindor is so quick it's almost forgettable. Yet across the books, Lavender gradually came into focus. First as a giggly girl with a fondness for divination, then as Ron Weasley's girlfriend, and finally, tragically, as one of the last casualties of the Battle of Hogwarts. But there's something crucial about her character that is easy to miss. Underneath the lavender perfume, giggles, and dramatic sighs, there lived a heart moulded not just for Gryffindor's roaring bravery, but for Hufflepuff's quiet loyalty. Lavender Brown could have easily found a different identity if the Sorting Hat had placed her elsewhere, and her story might have been very different. Most readers see Lavender as a stereotype, the pretty, emotional girl who obsessed over her boyfriend and gushed about love. Her infatuation with Ron is indeed intense, bordering on suffocating. She calls him One, adorns him with constant attention, and bursts into tears when things begin to unravel. It's easy to laugh at Lavender, but that same emotional expressiveness is what makes her such a compelling candidate for Hufflepuff. For Helga, Hufflepuff prized loyalty and kindness above all, and Lavender, for all her theatrics, was fiercely loyal to her friends and her beliefs. Her friendship with Parvati Patil is a small but telling example. In nearly every scene where one appears, the other is nearby. They take divination together, believe in Trelawney's visions, and remain emotionally supportive through school drama and wartime chaos. There's a sense of sisterhood between them that never fractures. Even when Trelawney is mocked, Lavender and Parvati stand by her, not just out of amusement, but out of real belief. That sort of steadfastness is the mark of a Hufflepuff, standing firm when others falter, not for applause, but because it's right. In Order of the Phoenix, Lavender's loyalty becomes more defined. She is one of the few students who believe Harry when he insists that Voldemort has returned, even after the Ministry ridicules him and the Daily Prophet labels him unstable. This moment is critical. It separates those who believe in the truth from those who follow popularity or safety. Lavender sides with the truth. She joins Dumbledore's army, the underground student group organized by Harry, Hermione and Ron, to prepare for the coming war. That decision, though never given a spotlight, reveals Lavender's quiet courage and unwavering values. She doesn't need a prophecy or a headline to know what's right. She chooses action. It is easy to dismiss Lavender's belief in divination as whimsy, but her deep investment in Professor Trelawney's class reflects something more profound than gullibility. Hufflepuffs are dreamers too. They believe in the magic of ordinary things, in feelings, in connections that can't be measured in points or trophies. Lavender's fascination with signs, omens, and the unseen reflects a heart that longs for understanding and meaning, not power. This aligns with the emotional intelligence prized in Hufflepuff. Lavender believes in what she feels, she trusts her heart, and while that sometimes leads her to overreact or misinterpret, it also means she doesn't turn away from people who are ridiculed by others. Her relationship with Ron often overshadows everything else about her. It's remembered as one of comic relief, a teenage crush gone too far. But even here, Lavender reveals more than superficial emotion. She doesn't hide her affection, she doesn't play games. She loves with abandon, openly, fiercely, and yes, dramatically. That intensity may seem immature, but it also shows courage of another kind, the courage to feel deeply. While Ron pulls away, unsure and uncomfortable, Lavender plunges in. She's not afraid to declare herself. In this, she embodies not just Gryffindor's daring, but also Hufflepuff's honesty and openness. When Ron nearly dies after being poisoned in Half-Blood Prince, Lavender rushes to his bedside. But when she sees Hermione already there, she misunderstands the moment and withdraws. Her heartbreak is visible. Here we see not just a lovesick girl, but a young woman dealing with rejection and humiliation with more grace than people give her credit for. She doesn't lash out. She doesn't spread rumors. She steps back. For someone so emotional, Lavender knows when to stop, when to let go, and that is no small strength. But it is during the Battle of Hogwarts that Lavender's depth finally surfaces in full. She could have run. Many students did. She could have stayed behind the lines. But Lavender chose to fight. She didn't need a prophecy or a starring role. She stood on the front lines with Harry, Neville, and the rest of the DA. And this is where her true heart was revealed, not in perfume and predictions, but in action. In the Deathly Hallows, we see her attacked by Fenrir Greyback. Though mortally wounded, she had stood her ground. It is Hermione who hurls a spell to throw Greyback off, but by then, Lavender has already paid the price. Her fight wasn't loud or remembered in grand speeches, but it was real. She stood with the defenders of Hogwarts, with her friends, and with her beliefs. The tragedy of Lavender Brown is that she never got a chance to grow beyond what others saw in her. She was framed by how people judged her love life, her class preferences, and her emotions. In a different house, especially Hufflepuff, her softness would not have been seen as weakness, but as strength. Her belief in others, her loyalty to Parvati, her gentle heart, and her devotion to Trelawney would have been nurtured, not mocked. In Hufflepuff, Lavender might have been celebrated for her empathy rather than dismissed for her melodrama. What would Lavender have become if sorted into Hufflepuff? Perhaps she would have taken up healing. Her interest in emotions, empathy, and unseen connections makes her a natural for it. Madame Pomfrey would have found in her a keen observer, someone who feels what others feel. And perhaps Lavender's experience with pain, both emotional and physical, would have made her more equipped than most to ease the pain of others. She might also have thrived in herbology. Professor Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, ran a nurturing classroom. Among plants, Lavender may have found the balance between her dreams and grounded reality. Her sensitivity would be an asset there too, understanding the needs of living things others overlook. Imagine Lavender not just surrounded by omens but by blooming mandrakes and fluttering leaves, listening for signs not from beyond but from nature. There's another side of Lavender that Hufflepuff could have drawn out: her capacity for forgiveness. After the breakup with Ron, Lavender never turns bitter. She doesn't scheme or try to sabotage him or Hermione. She accepts, mourns and moves on. That's maturity, that's emotional strength. It's also a trait many Hufflepuffs share: resilience through quiet suffering. She hurts, but she doesn't let the hurt change who she is. She remains kind. In Gryffindor, Lavender was always in the shadow of others: Hermione, Ginny, even Parvati. Her personality, loud as it was, never quite found a place among the house's celebrated heroes. But Hufflepuff, a house known for embracing the overlooked, might have given her the space to flourish. There, her kindness would not have to compete with heroism. It would be heroism. Her loyalty to Trelawney, often portrayed as comic relief, is another example of unshaken belief. When others abandoned the professor, Lavender stayed. Even after Umbridge dismissed her and McGonagall questioned her effectiveness, Lavender refused to turn. That's not foolishness, it's dedication, a kind of trust in people that goes beyond what's easy or popular. That is deeply Hufflepuff. There's a line in Goblet of Fire when Cedric Digory, the quintessential Hufflepuff, is described as modest and fair-minded. Those words could easily describe Lavender at her best. While others chase glory or power, she seeks connection. She's not competitive, not cruel, not calculating. In fact, in all her time at Hogwarts, Lavender never shows signs of meanness or judgment. She laughs, she cries, she dreams, but she does not tear others down. And in the end, Lavender does what only the bravest and most loyal students did. She stays. When the castle walls fall and Death Eaters pour in, she stands beside her friends. There is no wand duel with fanfare, no glorious victory, just a girl who believed in love, in people, in things that can't always be proven, and who gave her life defending them. It's the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more, Dumbledore tells Harry in Half-Blood Prince. Lavender, perhaps more than others, understood the unknown. She looked for meaning in stars and tea leaves, not out of foolishness, but because she believed the heart held truths too deep for textbooks. And when the unknown arrived at Hogwarts, cloaked in shadows and blood, she did not run. She stood in its path. The Sorting Hat once told us that it considers where a student asks to go, but also where they belong. Lavender's request is never heard. Perhaps she wanted Gryffindor all along, but the part of her that longed to care, to protect, to believe, that part whispered Helga's name. And maybe, in another life, under a different banner, Lavender Brown would not have been remembered just for 1-1 or divination class. She might have been a healer, a nurturer, a quiet warrior of the heart, still brave, still true, just seen with clearer eyes. Number 25. Dean Thomas. Dean Thomas was never a name that stirred the same excitement as Harry Potter or Draco Malfoy. He wasn't the chosen one, nor a cunning rival. But hidden behind the ordinary surface of this quiet Gryffindor student was a complexity the Sorting Hat had glimpsed in his very first moments at Hogwarts. It took only a few seconds for the Hat to decide, but what it saw in Dean was not so easily categorized. While he went on to share a dormitory with the boy who lived, Dean's true alignment may have belonged elsewhere, not out of betrayal, but out of natural affinity. Ravenclaw, house of the creative, the contemplative, the intellectual misfits who thought outside the box, might have suited Dean in ways Gryffindor never fully did. He had a Muggle upbringing, which meant his entry into the magical world was shaped not by inherited customs or expectations, but by raw wonder and curiosity. From an early age, Dean showed a passion for art. He sketched Quidditch players in motion, designed banners for Gryffindor matches, and his drawings were noted by fellow students for their precision and liveliness. "He drew a very good picture of Harry for the banner," remarked Seamus once, a small but telling detail nestled within Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. His artistic sensibilities didn't stop at idle doodling. They were part of how he perceived the world, visually, conceptually, and with emotional intelligence that's hard to teach. This kind of mind, the one that sees more than what is in front of it, would have flourished among Ravenclaw's thinkers and dreamers. Ravenclaw was never just about book smarts. It rewarded creativity and intellectual passion wherever it manifested. Luna Lovegood, perhaps its most iconic student, was not someone who studied harder than Hermione, but someone whose imagination shaped her worldview. Dean, too, looked at magic with an artist's lens. He absorbed wizarding culture like one studying an intricate mosaic, fascinated not only by spells but by the symbols and rituals surrounding them. He would have likely adored the moving paintings, seen not just as portraits, but as new dimensions of expression. There's something poignant about how Dean navigated life at Hogwarts. He wasn't loud, wasn't brash. In the middle of chaos, he remained level-headed. He never craved the spotlight, even when he began dating Ginny Weasley, a relationship that might have set off alarms of jealousy, but instead passed quietly, except for the usual teenage tensions. It's telling that Dean never used that relationship for social leverage. He respected Ginny, even when she ended things. His quiet dignity during that breakup revealed an emotional maturity rarely found in students his age. One could imagine how, in Ravenclaw, surrounded by students who valued self-possession and inner depth, Dean might have found greater kinship. It's often overlooked that Dean was technically a half-blood, though raised entirely as a Muggle. He never knew his real father was a wizard, having been killed by Death Eaters for refusing to join them. The wizarding world, then, was a world of orphans and ghosts for him, disconnected fragments he had to piece together on his own. In Ravenclaw Tower, where the riddles guarding the door demand thought rather than brute password repetition, Dean's mind might have come alive. The boy who taught himself about wizards from books borrowed or gifted, who pieced together truth from fragments. This was a Ravenclaw education long before Hogwarts welcomed him. There's an unspoken burden in Gryffindor. Heroism is expected, bravery is the currency. And while Dean was indeed brave, he joined Dumbledore's army, he fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, he stood up against injustice. His bravery never took the form of flashy declarations or reckless stunts. He was not a saving people type. Rather, his courage showed in his steady loyalty, his refusal to abandon the cause, even when he had to go on the run, uncertain of his blood status and hunted by Death Eaters. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Dean is found with Ted Tonks, Griphook and Gornak, surviving by wit and will. It is a Ravenclaw sort of endurance, quiet, resourceful, reflective. During his time in hiding, one can imagine Dean with a worn-out sketchbook, perhaps chronicling the changing seasons, the hidden campfires, the faces of his companions. Art as survival, art as memory. Even the goblin Griphook, so difficult to impress, may have glanced over his shoulder with interest. This is where Dean's Gryffindor bravery met his Ravenclaw sensibility, in using creativity not just for escape, but for meaning. The war wasn't just about fighting, it was about preserving the soul against despair. And Dean knew how to do that with a pencil in hand. At Hogwarts, his talents were mostly noted in passing. He was never chosen as a prefect, never given centre stage in Dumbledore's army. Yet he showed up for practice, he followed directions, and when the time came to fight, he was there with a wand ready. The sorting hat, perched on his head, in that first nervous moment, likely saw this stability and resolve. Plenty of courage, yes, it might have murmured, but also Creativity, reflection, a hint of a scholar's mind. The hat is known to take student preference into account, and perhaps Dean, not knowing anything of Hogwarts houses, didn't push one way or the other, but if it had leaned just slightly to the left, Ravenclaw Tower, with its arched windows and lunar view, could have been his home. The Sorting Hat once told Harry that he would have done well in Slytherin. Hermione could have been in Ravenclaw. Neville might have found a nurturing home in Hufflepuff. But Dean, no one ever asked whether he was truly where he belonged. And perhaps that's the greatest evidence of his misplacement. He fit in well enough to never be questioned, yet never quite stood out. In Ravenclaw, his artistic gift might have been nurtured. Imagine a young Dean Thomas sitting with Professor Flitwick after Charms class, discussing the parallels between wand movement and brushstrokes. Imagine him helping Luna illustrate a magical creature for the Quibbler, or staying up late in the common room to finish a painting of the Black Lake by moonlight. Even his understanding of Muggle culture, football, television, street art, could have given him a unique lens in Ravenclaw, where students are encouraged to cross boundaries and see connections between worlds. His interest in both magical and non-magical art would have placed him at the centre of a cultural fusion rarely explored at Hogwarts. He might have created the first exhibition of Muggle art interpreted through magical technique, a canvas that paints itself based on the viewer's mood, or a portrait that listens to your story and changes its expression accordingly. These are Ravenclaw ideas, imaginative, revolutionary. Dean's closest friend in Gryffindor was Seamus Finnegan, known for his loud laugh and frequent explosions in class. Their friendship, though strong, was also a bit of a contrast. Seamus was brash, hot-headed, a product of pure-blood family culture. Dean was softer-spoken, more deliberate. He kept a level head, even when Seamus doubted Harry's claims about Voldemort's return in their 5th year. This calm conviction might have made Dean feel more at home among Ravenclaws like Padma Patil or Terry Boot, students who questioned, analysed, sought reason before reaction. When the Carrows took over Hogwarts during the final year, and many Gryffindors went into hiding or stayed behind to fight, Dean was already out in the wilderness. But had he been at school, one wonders what his rebellion might have looked like. Not leading raids, but perhaps using enchanted graffiti to spread messages of hope. Not charging into battle, but organising hidden libraries for students needing escape. Ravenclaws fight with ideas, with subtlety, and Dean had the tools for that. It is often said that Hogwarts houses are not cages but reflections, yet reflections can distort. In Gryffindor, Dean was brave, yes, but bravery is only part of what he was. In Ravenclaw, he might have found the full mirror, the one that showed not just the soldier, but the artist, the thinker, the bridge between worlds. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure, goes the Ravenclaw motto. Dean's wit wasn't in riddles, but in how he observed, understood, and created. We are not defined by the house we wear like a badge, but by the choices we make. Dean chose kindness, creativity, and quiet strength. In the aftermath of war, he likely returned to art, not as escape, but as healing. There are few mentions of him in the post-war stories, but it is easy to imagine him opening a gallery in Diagon Alley where enchanted murals bloom on the walls and magical creatures burst from canvas frames, a place where Ravenclaw and Gryffindor converge in colour and courage. The Sorting Hat, ancient and wise as it is, doesn't always place for potential. Sometimes it sorts for what a student needs to become. Dean may have needed Gryffindor to teach him confidence, to sharpen his courage. But Ravenclaw would have embraced the boy he already was, an artist with a warrior's soul.